you just explore your musicianship and your creativity. And I think that even if maybe on a really sort of surface level or like a literal level, I'm not necessarily going to use that when I play in the orchestra. I just think that you bring that musicianship and then it makes you, I think that that always matters because you're bringing that like energy and creativity to what you do.
Welcome to episode 121 of the Bass Shed podcast. My name is Ryan Roberts. What's up, folks? What's going on? How y'all doing? What's the latest? Here's the latest. Listening to music on vinyl is a thing I've gotten into over like the past couple years, right? I was at the record shop last month. I like to just pop in there, rummage, if I have some time, take a look through the vinyl records, see if anything excites me, piques my interest. I picked up a couple. One album I picked up is of Stravinsky's The Soldier's Tale. Now I bought this because former podcast guest, that's how you say it. That's why I bought the album. I bought the album because of a former podcast guest. It was the second time New York bassist Mark Wade was on the show, and we were talking about his latest album at the time. And Mark and I played a little game to see if I could guess some of the inspirations for Mark's tunes. I felt like I was fairly accurate, which is a testament to Mark's compositions, not me. Mark is a brilliant composer. But I remember one of the tunes that stumped me was inspired by Igor Stravinsky's The Soldier's Tale. So I've always kind of had it in the back of my mind to check that out. Like, that stuck with me. And then I found it at the record shop. So I'm really excited to listen to this when I have enough free time to give it my full attention. Then I'm going to revisit Mark's record and do a little A-B and see if I could, find it in there. What else did I get? Picked up a Sonny Stitt record with bassist George Duvivier on it. Duvivier is one of my favorite bass players. Absolute favorite. I think it was last week, actually. I was doing some playing with a tenor saxophone player named Azar Lawrence. Azar had recorded with Miles Davis and McCoy Tyner back in the day, mid to late 70s. Azar, we were hanging out. Azar was talking about some festival he was at. He was playing with McCoy, and all the musicians for the festival were staying in the same hotel. It's like, man, Sonny Stitt was 2 doors down. I didn't even want him to hear me practice in the hotel. Like, that's Sonny Stitt. And I just started cracking up. I'm like, yeah, man, Sonny Stitt is the dude. Sonny Stitt is definitely the dude. On Saturday, April 6th, Lemur Music is hosting the Carr Kusavitsky-based and a Zoom meeting with the one and only Gary Carr. From 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m., there will be an open house. You can see, hear, and play the world-famous Carr Kusavitsky bass at Lemur Music. Following the open house from 3:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. This is all Pacific Standard Time. Bass virtuoso Gary Carr will be available for a Q&A via Zoom. You can RSVP by emailing lemur@lemurmusic.com. Space is limited for the open house to check out the bass. Yeah, remember that if you want to hop on the Zoom call with Gary Carr, that it is 3:30 to 4:30 Pacific Standard Time. So I hope you can all check that out. I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna hop on. I wanna see what's going on.
Hi, this is Jerry Jamont. I want to tell you about my upcoming book of bass transcriptions, JJ's Jukebox Volume 1. This is a collection of over 15 of my bass lines in standard notation and tablature. They are accurately done here by Ryan Roberts of the Bass Shed Academy. Each transcription is accompanied by a video where I talk about what was happening during the recording session, how I got involved, and how I approached each song. Stop by the BassShedAcademy.org to learn more about my book of transcriptions, JJ's Jukebox Volume 1, and purchase a signed copy of my memoirs, Make It Happen.
Lemur Music. Everything you need for the double bass is at lemurmusic.com. Shop their inventory of basses, bows, accessories, sheet music, etc. Lemur Music is also carrying electric basses and electric bass accessories. They are also offering in-person and remote lessons. Stop by lemurmusic.com and use the promo code TheBassShed, all one word, for 10% off. All right, my guest on the episode is Kathryn Schulmeister. Kathryn is a member of several contemporary music ensembles from around the world, located in Australia, New York, and Los Angeles. She has performed as a guest artist with various adventurous international ensembles that I'm not even going to try to pronounce. I'm not going to lie, because you know what? That won't end well. So I'm not going to even attempt it. I'm not even going to attempt it. But definitely stop by KathrynSchulmeister.com. There are links to her website in the show notes of this episode. Kathryn is equally passionate and experienced as an orchestral musician. She has served as a core member of the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra for 3 consecutive seasons from 2014 to 2017, and she has performed with the Ojai Festival Orchestra, Phoenix Symphony, New West Symphony, Colorado Chamber Orchestra, Pacific Lyric Opera, Maui Chamber Orchestra, and Hawaii Opera Theater. Kathryn received her Doctor of Musical Arts degree in Contemporary Music Performance from the University of California, San Diego, Master of Music degree from McGill University, and Bachelor of Music degree from the New England Conservatory of Music. What fascinated me about Kathryn is her passion and pursuit of creative and experimental music in tandem with having a very extensive academic background and performing resume, for that matter. That kind of duality, for the lack of a better term, is really intriguing to me, and it speaks to how versatile Kathryn is as a musician. I had a wonderful time speaking with her, and here's my talk with double bassist Kathryn Schulmeister.
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for reaching out to me.
Absolutely. Where are you in the world?
Well, I'm kind of in between LA and Stockton because I'm teaching at University of the Pacific. So I'm in Stockton right now, but I also have a place in LA and I go back and forth a lot.
Stockton, California?
Yeah.
Okay. Where is that? Like central, like Sacramento-ish?
Yeah, it's like an hour south of Sacramento, an hour and a half east of Oakland.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm new. It's my first year teaching here, so it's a very new thing for me.
How's the program?
It's good. They have a conservatory of music here. It's actually the oldest conservatory of music on the West Coast, which I just learned. It's a really pretty little campus. It's really nice. Honestly, it's a gem of a school, you know. I didn't really know too much about it before. I mean, I think I knew some students that did the, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Brubeck Institute. It's now known as a different name, but like I had known some musicians that had done that program. So that was like my sort of, you know, loose awareness of it. But then this job opportunity came up, and so it's been good.
Cool. Are you running the orchestra or just teaching the bass students or bass majors?
I'm teaching bass, but I'm also teaching a couple other classes to make it full time. So I'm teaching a course on Hawaiian popular music. I'm from Hawaii originally. And so that's like a music history class. And then I'm also teaching a music industry analysis class. So basically, I'm teaching some lecture classes to make my load full time.
Right. What fascinated me about going through your website is you have your doctorate, correct? From what school? Remind me again.
Oh, from UC San Diego.
UC San Diego. But then I saw a lot of media where you're playing avant-garde, and that was interesting to me, that you came from kind of a highly academic background and were pursuing something so highly creative, and I don't want to say not academic, but academia isn't the focus in that music. So how did you get into both? Actually, let's go back further. Is bass your first instrument?
I would say it's my first serious instrument. My grandmother was a piano teacher and I grew up next door to her, and I really wanted to be a singer. So I started out with like voice and piano lessons, but then I got into bass pretty young. I started taking lessons when I was like 9 or so. So once I started really getting into the bass, that instrument really became my primary. So I never developed the same skill in other things.
Okay. So then at what age did you like really decide like, okay, this is gonna be the thing? Like I'm gonna become a doctor of this thing.
Well, I didn't decide that until much later.
Sure.
But I would say that kind of gradually from middle school into high school, I started to do more summer programs. So again, I grew up in Hawaii, so the scene there was pretty small for music, but I was able to go to ISB. I actually went to ISB for the first time in 2003, I was around 8th grade. And I just remember being, wow, so inspired by all these incredible, not only the professionals, but also meeting kids my own age from across the country. And I was so impressed with them. And so that got me really excited about the possibilities of the bass. And then I would say since then, by the time it was 2005, that was my first summer I spent at Tanglewood, the Boston University Tanglewood Institute, the high school program. And I was there for 8 weeks. And so just being really immersed in that environment, I just knew like, this is definitely what I want to do, or at least want to pursue it as far as I can. So it just kind of gradually built until high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
How'd you get hip to ISB? Like, how did you learn of them?
Well, my very first teacher, George Wellington Sr., was very aware of all of these bass gatherings, and he actually started the Hawaii Contrabass Festival, and so he brought out all these amazing bass players. So that's why I was I got to hear and play for Francois Rabath when I was like 11. You know, I was really lucky. And his daughter, Fumiko Wellington, she really carried on his legacy. And so actually the way I went to ISB for the first time was George Wellington passed when I was about 12 or so. I studied with him from like age 9 to 12. And then in sort of honor of him, there was a small scholarship fund that sent a few Hawaii students to ISB, and I was one of those students. And so it was really like through his legacy that I got involved with ISB. Oh,
cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So then you continued all the way through. What was your doctorate on? Like, I know you have to write a thesis and I do not have a doctorate, but I know friends that do. What was the topic of your doctoral?
Yeah, you're so fascinated by the doctor of music thing. I can tell.
You know, I'm fascinated by it only because of this. Because I know people that have gone that far through school and can really play. And then I know people that have gone that far in school and cannot really play. And so the whole idea of it is really fascinating to me. Because it takes so much time and effort and all that stuff just to go through the program to graduate with that level of achievement. And then sometimes what they're going for, it doesn't really work. I'm not saying that about you. I'm just saying the thing itself is fascinating. And actually school for music kind of fascinates me because I dropped out and was like, screw this. Like I was gigging full time in college and I was like, whatever. I'm already making my living doing it. Why do the school thing? So it didn't work for me. So people that do pursue it to that level, it's fascinating to me because it's completely not my experience.
Totally. Yeah. I totally get that. The program at UC San Diego, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but that program is actually very focused on like experimental music. And
Mark Dresser's still down there?
Yeah. So I study with Mark. Cool. And I think the context before sort of makes sense as to why I went there. But basically, I studied on the East Coast. I went to NEC, I went to McGill. I was studying classical music. But when I was there, I got really into contemporary music, kind of in a lot of angles, like working with composers, but also improvising. And sort of over that time, I really, even though I was studying classical music formally, I knew that I was really interested in contemporary music. I was really interested in performing in Europe and being a part of that contemporary scene. And so that became very clear to me. But life, goes and takes all these unexpected turns. And I actually found myself moving back to Hawaii in my mid-20s and playing with the Hawaii Symphony and teaching there. And I was there for a couple of years. And the program at UCSD just sort of made sense as the next move because it was on the West Coast. So I could like expand my network, but still be close to home. And the program is really focused on contemporary music. And they have really good resources, like all graduate students are fully funded. So it sort of felt like that's a perfect opportunity to have 4 or 5 years to just really get into something that really interests me and work with great faculty. And so that's when I decided to go there in 2017 to do the DMA.
Okay. When throughout your process did you kind of catch the bug I mean, you just kind of spoke about it a little bit. What were the first musical experiences where you caught the bug for the creative avant-garde thing? Like, can you pinpoint, like, yeah, I heard them there?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I went to New England Conservatory of Music, so coming out of high school, I just wanted to be in orchestra. I think, the vast majority of students that go to music school want to just be in professional orchestras. But I think a lot of that comes from, that's just what they're exposed to, And then when I went to NEC, I just found myself really gravitating towards like the students in the jazz studies program and the students. There was a contemporary improvisation department. I don't know what it's called now. I think like the name of that department has changed over time. But I just like found myself being really intrigued by people that were like writing their own music and improvising. And I found there was something there that I wasn't getting in my classical education. I was getting a lot of things, but I was like, there's this creativity that's like missing, and I was just really interested in that. And so I started working with Anthony Coleman, who taught some of the improvisation ensembles, and he was really welcoming and would just have me in the improv ensembles. And I started taking like jazz for non-majors, and I started working with composers, and basically just over my 4 years there, I just got more and more involved. And so I stuck with the classical orchestra program, but I was just finding that like I felt more like myself when I was in those settings. And then the other thing too, I would say is that I just really like chamber music and like the intimacy of small groups. And in the orchestra, it's such a different thing. I mean, I love orchestra too, but I think I definitely prefer like smaller settings. And so with playing bass, it just made more sense to kind of be leaning more towards contemporary music if you want more of those kind of smaller settings.
So many of those characteristics seem like they would lead themselves to pursue jazz with the small group and the creativity and the improvisation and all that, but you never really went down that rabbit hole too deep.
I wish that I
or
had,
maybe you did.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. Actually, over the pandemic, I was like, wow, I have all this time. I want to really study more jazz. And so I was getting more into it then. But actually, I had to be careful because I actually developed an injury by practicing some like new things that I hadn't practiced before. Luckily, I've recovered now, but I kind of learned my lesson with that. But no, you're totally right. I'm fascinated by jazz. I've kind of like dabbled in it over the years, like studying it kind of on and off. It's always an issue of just like time and capacity, but I have like nothing but like tremendous respect for jazz musicians. And I feel like I don't see why anyone would not want to study it, because it's just amazing musicianship training, like for your ears and for your creativity. And like, to me, it just seems like obvious that you'd want to develop those skills.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that in the complete opposite. Like, I wish I had the time to pursue classical repertoire and all that stuff, but I don't, but it's always in the back of my mind. Like, someday I'm gonna, really kind of get my shit together, and I never do. Whatever. So where do you discover a lot of the music for the creative? And what would I keep wanting to call it avant-garde, because that's how I think about it. What's like the preferred terminology for describing that music?
I'm not big on terminology myself, and I think I do a wide range of things. I mean, a lot of what I've specialized in has just been playing like contemporary music that I guess you could say is on the more experimental end of things, like versus like there's contemporary classical music that I would say is more mainstream, and then there's contemporary classical music that's much more like extreme, and I kind of do all of that. And then there's another, I like to improvise, I like to write my own music, I like to do interdisciplinary work. And so that kind of stuff I would just put under the umbrella of like just creative music, or, I don't really like those genre terms myself, to be honest, because I want to always be someplace in between everything. So. Right.
Well, I'm blanking on her name, but I have like, I think, a double album, or like there's a lot of records in this like CD thing. Joelle.
Yeah, Leandra.
You know who I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yes. So when I think of that music, I think of that as avant-garde music. Oh, then there's some like jazz guys like William Parker. It's kind of like street art thing. I have a lot of those records. What is kind of the lineage of some of this? Does it go back to the 60s in New York when Jackson Pollock was coming up and Ornette Coleman? Is a lot of that music rooted there, or does it go further back to turn of the century Europe with composers like, I'm blanking on all the names. Not Shostakovich. Who's the other guy I'm thinking of? Starts with an S. He wrote a couple books.
You're not thinking
on
of Schoenberg?
Yes, I am thinking of Schoenberg.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
not.
So where does a lot of this music come back for, related to the double bass specifically?
I would not consider myself an expert on that, to be honest. But I mean, I think but I would. But I think as far as improvised music goes, I think that the lineage would be more drawn towards like jazz, like and Black American music, like that root of it. I would say that kind of improvisation, I think, is rooted. I mean, that's just, again, I'm not an expert in that, but that's what I would say.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so you would guesstimate that it all still kind of came out of the Ornette Coleman jazz in the 60s, free music, open expression thing? Or like how is it documented? I mean, I know like there's some Frank Proto stuff that's, I'm sure I'm butchering his name. That's my thing. That it's like charted out and written, but it sounds like it wouldn't be.
I mean, I think that there's such a wide range. Again, I don't consider myself to be an expert on this. I'm just thinking, like Mark Dresser probably knows so much more about this than I do. But I think it might even extend further back than that, because if you think about composers like John Cage, or like people making these like graphic scores, I think that there have been like even post 1945, like a lot of different, from a lot of different angles, people were approaching, like new definitions of like what music could be, or even like what does improvisation mean? Because like there's some pieces that are text scores, or there's some pieces that are like sonic meditations, and then there's also just music that's just improvised, and then there's charts that are made but a lot of room for improvisation around it. And so I think that like there are a lot of different scenes developing in different parts of the world that have different key players. But as far as like the bass goes, I mean, I think that there's a guy in England too that's like really known for a lot of super like hyper maximalist improvisation, and I'm forgetting his name right at the moment. I think that there the real sort of intense like physical improvisation, though, I still think that's rooted in coming out of jazz and like that tradition of improvising. I think so.
Yeah, no, I'm fascinated. I've never thought about any of this actually till this conversation. Yeah, because I mean, like when I learned about a lot of that music, the avant-garde stuff within Western art, music, whatever, I wasn't thinking about it as a bass player, and I don't think I've ever thought about that music going all the way back as a bass player. So then, I mean, I got really into that music and really into that thing and checking a lot of it out. But it was never, I never really connected the dots. When you perform these pieces, do you do a lot of solo work, or do you do it in a collective chamber situation?
I do both. I have played solo pieces. Like one ensemble that I work with a lot is called ELISION, and they're based in Melbourne, Australia. And they're kind of like the most extreme contemporary music group, like maybe in the world, that they play these like super hyper virtuoso pieces. And so with them, I've done like a number of solo pieces. But then we also play chamber music as well. But those are scores that are just really densely notated, almost like indecipherable rhythms. Sometimes they're like new notation systems that are like these graphic tablature type notation systems that are very complex. And so like with them, I've definitely done the most like hardcore contemporary music, I would say. But I kind of separate that though from like improvising. I mean, of course, all of these things that I do affect how I play, but like with them, I would just consider that that's like interpretation. I'm just interpreting a score.
Right. Yeah. What do you think that you get when I've seen a lot of those scores where it's the graphics, it looks like hieroglyphics and stuff. What do you feel like you get out of that you couldn't get out of like just a text thing? Because pitch isn't the purpose. It's in most of that music, I would say all. the concept is the underlying, the thing and all of it that connects that music. So I kind of like that they translate it in a different way and not through a notated standard notation system. But what do you think the relevance of the graphics is? Just a different way to interpretate something, so it leaves another variable to the performer?
Yeah, these are good questions. I think about this a lot because it's so much work to learn a piece like this. So I often think about like,
right,
what's the relevance? What's the significance of this? You know, it takes like hundreds of hours that I'm putting into this. So is this something that I feel like merits that time? So I think it's important to be selective about which pieces that you're working on that require that. But this ensemble, though, they're very selective about who they work with. So, like in my experience, what I would say is that because sometimes people will have a reaction to some of these hyper complex pieces that just say, "Oh, well, it just sounds improvised." So, like, couldn't you just improvise that? But I would say no, because you wouldn't do those things. And there's a process that I'll say, for example, this one piece that I worked on a lot that has a very specific, unique notation system. It's called The Wreck-Of-Former Boundaries by Aaron Cassidy. And
hold on, what was it? The record?
Oh no, The Wreck.
I didn't know if it was Wrecker.
Yeah. The
Wreck. Okay.
Yeah, The Wreck-Of-Former Boundaries. Yeah. And that piece, there's something about that score I really enjoyed working on because there were not specific notes. So I wasn't concerned about the specific notes. Sometimes when I'm working on pieces that have, this kind of like super dense normal notation where there's notes there, but it's so complex and so rhythmically difficult that it's impossible to play all of them. I get really frustrated because with my classical training, I want to play everything on the page. And so then I'm like,
you're trying to nail it. Yeah.
Yes. And then I get really like, it's like messes with me psychologically. And so it's like a relief to like not have to worry about the notes and just focus more on these physical movements. And there's something about it that, it was so specific about exactly which moves I was supposed to make, like with my right hand and with my left hand, and then also kind of like energetic ideas or like ideas about like how much resistance I would feel versus like non-resistance, things like that. And it was a really interesting experience where it was more like choreographing what I would do on a physical level rather than focusing on like the notes I would have to reproduce.
Right.
And it was very, very specific and very precise. And it's something that I wouldn't be able to improvise because it was very specific, and so that to me was like very interesting. And then once you go through a piece like that, it's just like learning Bach or something where it's like, okay, if you've learned this concept of like, playing multiple lines and having counterpoint, then you can kind of bring that to your own improvisation. And so having learned all this choreography and these different things, it's like, okay, I learned all these things that I wouldn't learn otherwise. And now if I improvise, I can like introduce some of them. So it kind of becomes part of your tool set, So that to me is like the interesting thing about it.
That is fascinating. And it was that piece you just described sound more like a performance art thing where the sonics were maybe secondary and it was really challenging the performer to do this kind of dance, which is fascinating. And it's interesting you brought it up because that's what I was thinking about is how does studying that impact, your classical playing? And then how does that impact playing in a section? Because do you have to rein that in to play in a section? Because maybe the whole section isn't dancing.
Yeah, I mean, it feels very far from like playing in a section.
Right.
And then, I mean, even like your instrument, like I get rosin everywhere. It's like a mess because my bow's everywhere. It's like even... It's
do you
like
play
hard
a bass
to play
with a completely different setup?
I should,
Okay.
I should, because I really want to use like light gauge, like spirochore strings and like there's rosin everywhere. And then, it's like horribly sticky and afterwards. So, it's like that piece is not easy to program with something like I always, if we're doing it, I'm like, it's either at the end or it has to be right before the intermission because I have to like clean my bass.
Right.
Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's really good to experiment with things. Especially solo things, because you just explore your musicianship and your creativity. And I think that even if maybe on a really sort of surface level or like a literal level, I'm not necessarily going to use that when I play in the orchestra. I just think that you bring that musicianship and then it makes you I think that always matters because you're bringing that like energy and creativity to what you do. So and I feel like for me, I know that not everyone is like this, but for me, I feel like I have to do different kinds of things. Otherwise, I'm going to get bored. So
Sure.
I need to do different. I also don't want to only play crazy new music either. I want to do different things. Yeah.
Right. All right. So that being said, having new things, what do you listen to in your free time?
Gosh, I feel like I haven't had that much free time recently.
Okay, but if you put on like an album, or you have music on in the background, or just whatever,
Yeah.
or even if it's in your car driving somewhere, what's on the radio?
One thing I really like that I've been listening to recently is there's this cellist. She's a German cellist named Anja Lechner. And my former mentor at UC San Diego, Kamau Kenyatta, turned me on to her. She is a really interesting cellist who she plays a lot with this French pianist. I can't remember the name. She has this album called Lontano that I've been listening to a lot, that it's cello and piano, but it's kind of the music that I want to do, which is sort of like in between. It's like some classical arrangements, some arrangements of some like pieces, some improvised music. And she has such a beautiful, rich, dark sound on the cello. She can play, you can look her up. She can play Bach really well, but she can also play improvised music really well. And she just, to me, seems like, I love her sound. I love the music. It seems very free. It kind of like breathes in between being more composed and more improvised. And like, I just am really inspired by her and that collaboration she has with that pianist. And so that's something that like, I want to do more of that kind of thing.
Do you write?
I do. And I want to do more of it because it's something that, again, like, it's just like capacity and time that I've sort of dabbled in, but I really, really want to like make that more of a priority. And I really want to prioritize more of those projects in my career.
When you have done it, do you compose on piano? Do you compose on bass? What's your process?
I've done both. I've definitely like composed with piano. I've also composed on bass. I've also just singing and like just imagining. I've also one process that I really enjoyed was during the pandemic. I kind of like, I don't miss the pandemic, but in some ways I miss that time because it was a very creative time. Like I was home a lot and not playing all these like things for other, organizations. Like I really got to explore a lot of my creativity. And I feel like since things have picked up again, that I haven't had as much time to do that. But I did some collaborations with a dancer who made a dance film. And what I did was I just like would record and overdub myself over and over again, different ways of playing the bass, like putting the bass on a table, like threading strings through the bass, playing on the boat.
Prepared bass? Or did you create a prepared bass? Yeah.
Yeah. Doing all different kinds of things, like kind of playing the bass like a percussion instrument, and also like using my voice and just I really enjoyed the process of just being inspired by a film and just kind of like improvising based on what I was seeing. It was a dance film. So I really, and then I just what I did was I just improvised with it over and over again. And then I just kind of edited and like took all those layers, like a kind of collage, and I kind of composed an editing process. Really enjoyed that too. So.
You enjoyed editing?
Yeah, yeah.
Editing is so tedious. I hate editing. Editing's the worst.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I don't know.
Really?
I just like, it was kind of felt like composition, like editing.
It is that, yeah.
So.
Yeah. There's that element to it, but it's so, just the nature of editing is tedious. Like go back, listen. Does it work? No, it doesn't. Like, I think it takes a specific, two things on this, actually. This will somehow tie into something, but there's something about the skill set that it takes to be an editor that is the same characteristic to obsess in a practice room. There is that because it's just as tedious and it's just as it means so much, but at the same time you can exhaust it and it can become inconsequential too. So there's a relationship there, but for whatever reason I can't get into it in the editing thing, but I know that there's a similar thing there. And it's fascinating to me whenever I'm getting into new projects, including aspects of this whole thing. I have to find the bass in this, then I'll understand it. Does that work? Have you dealt with that before? Like, okay, I know I already deal with this skill set somehow in relation to the instrument, how can I kind of bridge that gap mentally so that I don't think this sucks and I just want to go practice?
It's so interesting you say that because there's a really amazing professor at UCSD named Steve Schick, who's like a legend, incredible. And he's someone who has just all these amazing skills. He's a great conductor, he's a great writer, he's a great speaker, an amazing teacher, amazing percussionist. But when you talk to him, he talks about like all of these things are just my percussion practice. They're just all my percussion practice, which is so interesting. So it's kind of like what you're saying, like you just feel like you're finding the bass in this, I don't even remember what your question was, but what you said just reminded me of that.
Have you gone through that process? Like it's basically like, I already do this somewhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, practicing is just self-editing. So, do you make those relationships mentally when you get into new either pieces of music or new skills that are adjacent to your career? It took me a while to learn that. I don't know how many people think of it.
No, I feel like it's actually taken me a long time. Like, strangely enough, it's actually taken me a long time to even learn how to enjoy my practicing. Because I think for so long I was like, I don't know. I think just as a young person, like pursuing classical music, I think you just get so, what's the word? Like you get so focused on like the competitive aspect of it. And so practicing always feels like it's about an audition or about, like a recital or I don't know. And it kind of just got really stressful. And honestly, I feel like it's only in recent years that I've really learned to like enjoy my practice as like, wow, like it's this really creative, beautiful thing. And I'm so lucky to be able to do this. And and kind of coming at it in a really different way, and to just like enjoy the learning process rather than feel like stressed and feel like I'm just self-critical the whole time. So, but I definitely, as much as possible, really try to approach as much as I can. I'm not always successful at this, but like I try to approach everything with that same kind of learning mind. But there's been other things that have affected it too, like getting really into yoga, like other kinds of practices that I think have also helped me like reframe my bass practice too.
We'll be back right after this.
This portion of the Bass Shed podcast is brought to you by the International Society of Bassists, commonly referred to as ISB. Visit isbworldoffice.com for news and events. Also check out the tri-annual publication Bass World, which features articles about jazz and orchestral performers, soloists, sheet music, and recordings. isbworldoffice.com is a wonderful resource for bassists. isbworldoffice.com. Get featured on the Bass Shed podcast. Stop by thebassshed.com/feature to get featured on the Bass Shed podcast. Promote your upcoming gigs, tour dates, recordings, social media handles, and more. Featured listeners are also included in my newsletter, so you can get followers on the interwebs. You can also engage by clicking support the show in the episode notes of this episode and all other episodes. Get featured on the Bass Shed podcast and get heard by the bass community around the world. Folks, I gotta let you know about some new music from amazing bass players. Double bassist Dark Oles has recently released a new album titled Moods in Freedom. This is a collection of 10 free improvisations on solo double bass. It's a wonderful album. Check it out on Spotify or wherever you get new music. Again, the title is Moods in Freedom. Another killer album, but with a totally different feel, is Tom Kennedy's latest recording titled New Start. Double bassist and electric bassist Tom Kennedy is joined by an all-star cast including Mike Stern, Dave Weckl, and Randy Brecker. I had the pleasure of speaking to Dark Oles and Tom Kennedy about their new releases, so stay tuned for upcoming episodes of the Bass Shed podcast with Dark and Tom. And in the meantime, check out their new records.
Excellent, sir.
I want to come back to you enjoying your practice time because I want to find out how you structure practice time and all those things. I feel like that is a topic that's not talked about as much as it should be. It's like having a structured practice time. I want to come back to that. But when going into other pursuits like yoga or anything that you're going to continue to grow in, how do you feel that has impacted your playing? And even
Yeah.
the new excitement about practicing? Are you hearing new stuff come out, even if you're playing a piece or an excerpt you've played 1,000 times? It's like there's something different to it, not just technically, but musically, because you're bringing a new emotional energy to the bass?
Yeah, I mean, I started really practicing yoga more consistently probably 7 or 8 years ago, but it was, I think, a combination of just physically like feeling better because I was, more active. And then also just the practice of yoga, like you do a lot of like focusing on certain body parts and body awareness. And I think that then just made me much more aware of like tension and how I was holding my body when I was playing. And so there was more awareness there. But then the kind of philosophical side of it, I remember there was one yoga class that I took where the teacher said that it's not about stepping onto your mat as like an expert. It's about like stepping onto your mat as though it's the first time, like even if it's the 10,000th time that you've stepped onto it. And I was like, that's so beautiful. I realized that it should be like that with the bass. Like it should be about like it's as though it's the first time and like having the beginner's mind. I mean, of course, there's many different types of yoga, but in the places that I was practicing, there were a lot of conversations about, being where you are, understanding, having compassion for yourself, understanding that your body's different every day, understanding that doesn't matter if the other person can do all of the headstands and whatever, that, you're just where you are. And so there were just a lot of parallels to me that I felt were really, really healthy, especially because it's not like I'm not trying to be a professional yogi, so just having a practice that I was doing. Whereas with bass, it's like, I think my practice had maybe a little bit of toxicity from this like competitiveness, and like tension and kind of like feeling, all these emotions around that. And so it just was really helpful and like healthy for me to do something that was a practice that I was just doing for like my health and well-being, and realized that there were a lot of lessons I could bring over to the bass.
So do you think that the toxicity can be paralleled with the further you've, gone into your professional career? Because I noticed for myself, when your finances are tied to it, then it's a different thing. Then it's just like you have to do these gigs, or you have to go do that, or you have to have so many students a month because you have bills to pay. And it's just what it is. There's it's like there's a lien on your playing. Like I have to play this much every month to make that money to pay for this lifestyle. And it becomes something different. And it does that for me sucked the creativity out in a lot of ways. I felt because I was playing so much and so many of the similar types of gigs, my playing got stale. Like I didn't feel like I was bringing anything new to it, because it's just like, all right, where are we at? Fine, let's do it. Go. So it took for me taking a step back and kind of releasing a lot of that, dealing with my occupation as a musician differently than just being a full-time performer. All that is the setup for, have you found something similar to that? The deeper you've pursued, your professional career, that is what, then you're focused on the job. You have to be focused on the job, and you don't get the luxury of focusing on the art as much as, we could when we were younger and we didn't have the same financial responsibilities and things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's
I think one thing that's like, I know for me, I think a lot of stress came from, putting a lot of expectations on myself for whatever reason, whether it's because I want to win that audition, or I want to, someone asks me to do something, and so I feel like I have to perform at a certain level. And, there's only so much you can do. You can't really fully control how fast you learn something. And so I just found that really stressful, because in the practice room, it's like I have X amount of time, and maybe I wasn't really organized about how much time I allotted to do this certain thing. And so it just felt like this stressful process of like trying to force yourself to grow maybe at a faster rate than you're really capable of, And what I tell my students all the time is just slow is fast, like slow down. Right. It's like so much better to just focus on a few things and like really learn them well and have them stick with you than try to like rush to do all these things, and then it's not, nothing sticks. And also you're just reinforcing a lot of bad habits. But it's so hard when I think there's just so many demands coming at you all the time, and you want to keep up with other people, and so-and-so's doing that, so I want to do that. And it's just, it's a really tough career. So yeah, so I think like having a lot of self-compassion and also just trying to really focus on what like where you are and what your needs are. I know for me as maybe some of the sort of bad habits came from like as a younger player, like wanting to hide, weaknesses rather than just like really face where I was and be where I was. And so just it took a long time, I think, to kind of just like embrace just being like, yeah, I'm not good at this. I need to work on this and I'm going to focus on that. I think we all kind of want to shy away from the things that we're not as good at, So
Of course. Yeah.
yeah. So but it's understandable because, you're in a competitive field. So it makes sense that you feel a lot of anxiety with others,
How do you bring in a lot of the yoga concepts or mentalities to your students so that they can kind of incorporate that and make those parallels early on in their journey?
Yeah, I mean, well, I early in the year, I work with them all on, how to warm up the body, how to do stretches, especially, because I went through this injury recently. I gave them all like a lacrosse ball because I want them to warm up their wrists and hands like before they even touch the bass. I speak with them about, meditation, sometimes do meditation with them, but I think, as a teacher, you can offer all of these things, but I think, it also takes time for students to really sort of fully
absorb,
take that on for themselves, and they're so young, their bodies don't hurt yet,
Right.
later on they'll be like, oh wow, like this hurts,
yeah later on all it does is hurt, like at a certain point all the body does is hurt. Yeah.
That's so funny now playing in orchestras because, during the break, everyone's just like sharing injury stories and everything. But yeah. But yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about just like setup and body awareness because I mean, that's just everything. Because if that's not working, then nothing else is going to work, So sure. I just really try to focus on that as like a fundamental. And I encourage all of them to do some kind of practice, whether it's like a martial arts or dance or like some kind of physical practice where they develop some body awareness.
Now to go back to your practice time, how are you?
Yeah.
What's your typical practice routine like these days?
It's hard because it's not typical. It's just like what's coming and oh my gosh, like, just trying to frantically work towards whatever it is. But no, I mean, as far as like making my practice more enjoyable, I mean, I've always practiced scale, like going back to high school, like scales is a really big part of my practice. I like to play with a drone. And then the thing that I've kind of introduced to bring me more like pleasure and joy in the practice is I always give myself some time to improvise like early in the session so that like right away I'm feeling just that creative outlet, that connection to my instrument, and then I mean, it depends on what I'm working on, but like in an ideal world, I really spend like a significant amount of time doing some technical things. So like right now I really want to work on my vibrato. So I always make time for working on that. Could be just different left hand or right hand exercises. And then the rest of the time is just focused on like whatever I have coming up. And so I do, list out everything I need to do. And I usually like before I even play, I like write down how much time I'm going to give myself. And then I use a timer and I use my phone and I just put it on airplane mode. And then I time myself, like I'm going to spend, 30 minutes on this or 15 minutes on this. Because otherwise I will totally just go down a rabbit hole and stay on one thing for like 2 hours, so.
Sure. Yeah. I think that, that's normal. I was doing that for a while with the egg timer and I had a journal and like, and then I think like I exhausted myself on that. So I went back to just doing whatever I felt. And then, it's always an ongoing thing. I feel like it's almost similar to like any kind of workout regimen. You just need, maybe 1 or 2 cheat days a week where like, whatever, I'm not going to touch scales or this and that. I'm just going to do whatever, but still spend time with the instrument.
Yeah.
What are some vibrato practices you go through? Like I've learned it from teachers visually and like in person, but I've never seen like a book about it or any kind of standardized or centralized information on it.
I've been trying different things. It's something that I've been kind of struggling with recently. But basically what I usually do is I usually set a metronome on a slow tempo. We're going to get really nerdy right now.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Really nerdy.
Yeah, great.
A slow tempo, like 50 or something like that. And usually what I do is I just try to play a slower, wider vibrato than I normally would, because right now I just feel like my vibrato tends to be too narrow and too fast. And so I'm just trying to make it more like wide and slow and feel more comfortable in that. And then usually what I do is I choose a part in the bass that, like second position or something like this, you know, in the Raboff method, that feels more sort of centered and stable, and just start to play like either 2 or 3, I don't know what the word would be, like pulses or something per beat. And then I just try to, as soon as I find that, I just try to gradually move, you know, using long bows, like whole notes, something like that. And then I just try to move either within that position to other fingers. So maybe starting with the second finger, going to first finger, fourth finger, and then I move across the strings. And then I try to move to different positions. And basically I'm just trying to find more sort of consistency as I'm like moving from finger to finger. And then I might gradually speed it up if it's feeling good, move it up to like 4 pulses or whatever. That's been one approach. Another approach has been just watching people play, like watching like either videos, or sometimes I even do this like when I'm playing in a section, I'm like, wow, they have a really good vibrato. I'm just going to try to like watch what they're doing and just try to use that power of like mirroring, because I think that can be very powerful too. Like just collecting, you know, samples of like, whose vibrato do I really like? How are they doing it? And then just try to mimic it. And so sometimes I'll just look up videos and just try to like mimic what they're doing. So I'm still working on it. I'm still experimenting with it. Haven't found all the answers yet. But it's something that's like really important. So I usually try to find some time, like 10 minutes or so, to work on it every day.
How much have you dug into singers when getting the vibrato?
That's a great suggestion. You know, that was something that Mark Dresser suggested when I came to him, and I was like, I really need to work on my vibrato. And then he's like, you should listen to singers. And he gave me all these different, and also different other instrumentalists too. Sure. So a little bit, like not too deep, but if you have any recommendations, I'm open to that.
I don't, but I feel like I remember Jeff Braditich talking about it when we spoke, and he was, I don't want to butcher what he had to say about it, but I will accidentally. I think someone that was close to him, maybe his mother, was a singer. And so he learned kind of vibrato technique from that, which is just like, you know, the note is completely centered. Yeah. And then, you know, then you start wide. And then as the note goes through to like project through the note, the vibrato would speed up. And I remember watching one of my former teachers, Joel DeBartolo. We had a couple lessons on vibrato, and that's kind of where I stopped with studying it. But it was all based on that. It was all based to get the lyrical quality from a vocalist.
Yeah.
And so when I listen to vocalists, I listen to that. Yeah. But I don't like sit and like take notes of like what Renee Fleming's doing or anything. Yeah. To like really study it. Maybe I should. I don't know. No,
I mean, I feel like, you know, people have different views on this. At the end of the day, it's like finding what works for you. And I feel like, I think there's benefits from kind of having this analytical approach, but then there's also benefits from just, there's such a power of just like, you know, it's like when you teach a student, you just demonstrate it and then they can just do something. So I also feel like just listening and just trying to, what do they sound like? And then just trying to find it. Like that's also really, really beneficial too.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you got coming up?
Well, I just gave my faculty recital on Monday, so I'm just kind of like, letting that go. But no, but as far as like big solo things, I guess my next big project is I'm going to Germany in April, and I'm performing some of these pieces I was talking about in Germany, in Hanover. Okay. So, and then also going to Australia in late June, early July. So those are the big things. And then I'm working on an album that's supposed to come out in December. So that's my big project for this year as well.
Where are you at in the process? Are you still like pre-production storyboard phase, or have you started recording?
No, I have not started recording yet. It's still very much in the compositional stage, but it's going to be all my own original music. So I'm really excited about that. Planning to record in September and hoping to release in December. So it's all feels very, very soon. So, but that's like my big project for this year. Yeah.
What's what can we look forward to hearing on that?
Well, the thing I'm really excited about it is that they're going to be like studies. And so I want to take a lot of these different like techniques and experiences that I've developed over the years and actually publish some sheet music to go along with it. That would be these sort of etudes, but all of them will have like a lot of freedom for improvisation as well. So a lot of the things that we talked about that I'm interested in doing. So my hope is that this could be something that if people are interested in, they could take on and experiment with themselves as well. So it'll come out with both the scores and the album at the end of the year.
Okay. Kathryn, thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks so much. I'm so like, how did you find me? I feel like I'm so like obscure.
Just online. I came across your website and then I'm like, this is fascinating that it was two different things. That was interesting to me because I don't typically hear the hyper creative from someone who's done that much academia.
Yeah.
You know, or vice versa. Like the people that really get into that are just kind of like whatever, you know, I'm doing this total freedom, personal. They're looking to, you know, that music is something. Actually, we didn't talk about this. Is the pursuit of that freedom, was that driven by some personal self-discovery? Like as a jazz musician, I know I'm into that music because I've been trying to understand who the hell I am in the world, and it's all through the vehicle of that music. Is there a relationship to you with the hyper creative free music?
I think so.
What have you learned about yourself in the process?
I think I'm only
besides like, holy shit, this all needs so much work, including myself.
I think I'm only at the beginning. I really feel like, you know, I feel like I'm just starting to come into my own. So, yeah, you might have to ask me that again in like 5 or 10 years or something. But yeah, no, there's, yeah.
Yo, this is Craig Gash. Subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on the Instagram, the YouTube.
Okay.
Leave us a comment.
I just stubbed my toe!
All right, that was my talk with Kathryn Schulmeister. I love when I get to talk to musicians and you can get a sense of how they play just by speaking with them. I felt like the conversation was full of exploration. It was a lot of fun. Big thanks to Kathryn for being on the show. And again, stop by her website, KathrynSchulmeister.com, to learn more about the ensemble she performs with and all the things that I can't pronounce. There's a link to her website in the show notes here on this episode. Again, KathrynSchulmeister.com. That's about all I got for this one, folks. That's about all I got. I will catch you on the next one in a minute.